grew up in Massachusetts, mostly around the Cape Cod area. At one time we owned a nursing home, and Mom was a registered nurse. My dad was an LPN. Went to high school in the big city. My first restaurant job was actually as a dishwasher. In the day and age where there was no dishwashing machine, it was all done by hand. And I can remember they didn't even provide gloves for me to use. Washing with all those chemicals, when I would finish my shift, my arms would look like lobsters. The summer before I went off to college, I had 2 restaurant jobs. I was a busboy in the daytime in a restaurant called the Daniel Webster Inn in Sandwich, Massachusetts on the Cape. And I worked there in the daytime, and at nighttime I worked at a restaurant called White Cliffs of Plymouth. And it was a dramatic restaurant high on these beautiful white cliffs looking across Cape Cod Bay. And that was the first time that I saw the elegance of fine dining and beautiful people, and that caught my eye. Went on to college in Ohio, Marietta College. I was there during the period of time, it was peak Vietnam, and I was going to be drafted. Decided I wanted to enlist. Sat with the recruiter, took a test, aced it, went in and spent 4 years in the Air Force. It was during that time I ended up in Hawaii, and my career field was photo intelligence. So my job in the Air Force was primarily an 8-to-5 job. My roommate had been working at Chuck's Steakhouse in Waikiki, and he was getting promoted to the next level. And he asked me if I wanted his job, and I said, sounds great. So I started working in the kitchen and on the exhibition cooking line. And if the handwritten ticket had an X on it, it meant that they wanted sour cream in their baked potato. And if it had a 0, they wanted butter. And if it was a 0 with an X in it, I knew to put the butter in first and then put sour cream in later. And they knew they had real talent there at that point. That was 1967. And I've been in the restaurant business every day of my life since then. Chuck's Steakhouse in Waikiki was the original steakhouse of Chuck Rolls. Chuck was a Cornell Hotel Restaurant School graduate, and he married the daughter of the largest hotelier in Waikiki, Roy Kelly. And they opened in one of their hotels, and they had this idea. It was a salad bar with a limited menu of a couple of steaks and lobster tail and mahi-mahi. And it was an enormous success. And it was such a simple concept that's been copied many times. And when you go back in the history of restaurants, you can often find a Chuck's Steakhouse person that was their first job. The lessons that I learned at Chuck's Steakhouse was really the hospitality, making people happy, and realizing that I had that people pleaser gene inside me. And that has driven me and taken me throughout the course of my career. I had an opportunity to go with 2 people that I worked with at Chuck's, and we wanted to do our own restaurant. And so I led the charge back to Colorado Springs, an area that I had known previously, and sold the concept to a developer there. And my friend DeRoy Labatai, Samoan, and Jimmy Morita, Japanese, we went and we opened our first restaurant. And it was a version of Chuck's Steakhouse, only we called it Kamehameha One, a Hawaiian steakhouse. And the biggest lesson we learned there is that we knew the restaurant business, but we had no clue on the business of the restaurant. And it's 2 different things, and we didn't succeed with it. 3 families couldn't survive on it together. And so we all kind of went our separate ways. And that was the time when I got hired by Specialty Restaurants Corporation out of Long Beach, California, and they were just starting to open these restaurants called 94th Aero Squadrons. I spent approximately 8 years with Specialty Restaurants, having gone from entry level up to the very top position. And I had the corporate American dream, but at times I had a challenging life at the same time. trying to succeed with my personal life and the challenges that being away 10 days at a time on the road, coming back exhausted, and then going back on the road again. It was always a challenge. It was exciting what I was doing. I was very committed to it, but it was like hitting yourself over the head with a hammer. Sometimes you realize that when you stopped, it felt better. So I think I reached a point where I thought I was kind of like on a treadmill and I couldn't get off, and I left specialty restaurants. A dear friend who I had worked with in specialty restaurants, Bob Samble, said to me, "Jack, come on to Chicago." I said, "Why?" He said, "I'm not going to tell you. Please come." So I went to Chicago, and Bob at the time was working with Arnie Morton, and he took me to this restaurant that was subterranean. I walked into the most magical thing I'd ever seen in my life. It was spectacular. The lights were beautiful. The interior had vibrant colors. People were well dressed, had an amazing upscale feel to it, and it turned out that it was the very first Morton Steakhouse. And I realized that this was that moment that my career had led me to, and I got it. I understood the subtlety of everything that was going on. And from that experience, I went back to Fort Lauderdale and negotiated and acquired a property that had been unsuccessful for specialty restaurants. And a set of circumstances took me to where Burt Reynolds. Burt had been filming a movie in South Florida. It was Elmore Leonard's book, Stick. This would have been 1983. And Burt had been scouting locations to shoot the movie. And he was in his helicopter and he flew over Port Everglades and he saw this amazing building and he landed there. The building was closed, but he decided he wanted to find out more about it. Burt and I had a mutual friend who was a maitre d', and Burt asked him what was going on with the property that he had just seen inside Port Everglades. And he told Burt that a guy by the name of Jack Jackson was going to open a restaurant there. And Burt said, "I'd like to meet Jack Jackson." And so they arranged for me to go up to Burt's home up in Jupiter Island. I went up there and I come to the door, a houseman greets me, brings me into a living room, and then Burt Reynolds walks in. And he wanted to hear my story, and I gave him my story of what I wanted to do and my experience with Morton's Steakhouse. Burt was familiar with Arnie Morton's son, Peter, who had a successful restaurant in Beverly Hills. And although it was different than the steakhouse format, I think the credibility of Arnie Morton was what helped me to make the deal with Burt. And Burt Reynolds and I became partners, and we owned and operated Burt and Jack's in Fort Lauderdale for over 18 years.
I remember when Jack came to Chicago to see the original Mortons, and I saw that look, and I knew it was going to happen. And he took that idea and South Floridaized it for Burt and Jack's. And let me tell you about the food. The food was great, okay? He took that baked stuffed lobster and served it in a way no one else did it. They took all the lazy man's lobster, he took all the work out of it. So you can order that lobster and not have to worry about staining your shirt or your wife's dress or something as you ate it, as you battled it. The desserts, the hunk of chocolate cake. No one was doing that stuff then.
There's a moment where I'm entertaining in my home and my phone rings. And it's David Gershenson, Burt's manager. Burt wants to charter the 727 that Caesar's Palace has and bring 30 of his celebrity friends out for the opening of the restaurant. And he said, and Burt will pay for 50% of the airplane. Your part is only going to be $35,000. Well, I said, that's great, and had no idea where I was going to get $35,000, but that sounded like a big deal to me. Eventually, we figured out how to do that. grand opening. We have 300 people, black tie, invited, and we have an airplane full of his friends flying in. And it was an electric moment. I was glad I had my buddy Bob Sample with me.
I planned to come to the opening, and he said, listen, I would really love it if you can come and actually help me. I need you to concentrate on the celebrities. What I'd like you to do is go pick them up at Pier 66 on the yacht, bring them here, make sure they know what to do and how to go and all that. Keep an eye on them, and then eventually take them back to the hotel. Great. And I look at the list. Ernest Borgnine, Ricardo Montalban, George Siegel, Jim Brown, Bernie Casey, obviously Burt, Lonnie, Esther Williams. Oh, God. This is unbelievable. I'm excited, but I'm petrified. We go, we get them. They couldn't be nicer. Well, they go to the party, and the party is fantastic. The cameras and the entertainment tonight, it was a great evening. We go through the night. Everybody has a great time. It's time to take them back.
And it was a magnificent success, and I'm sure that I poured myself a stiff martini at that point. I was always Jack Jackson, and I had accomplished quite a bit in my restaurant career. But I went from being Jack Jackson to Jack Jackson, Burt Reynolds' partner. And my life changed a lot at that point. The doors that opened to me, everybody wanted to know me, meet me, and I had to stand in every night, and I was representing Burt and myself at the restaurant. And people recognized that Burt Reynolds was probably not going to be there, but they would say, but I met Jack Jackson, Burt Reynolds' partner, and he showed us a great evening. During the first 6 months we were open, I wasn't sure we were going to make it. South Florida is notoriously slow during the summer season. The locals would say, so what happens when season comes? Are you going to be like every other restaurant in South Florida? You just don't know the locals during the season. I said, well, I can tell you anything you want to hear. You're just going to have to come around and see what happens. And we took care of the locals. And it was certainly a significant part of our success. We were about the only restaurant in South Florida that required gentlemen a jacket. And sometimes people from the Northeast would tell me that their tennis outfit cost more than the suit that I had on. And they were right, but they weren't going to get into the restaurant. You put a gentleman in a jacket and women feel comfortable dressing. And when women dress and show off, your restaurant looks beautiful. And that was the reason that we did it. We attracted businessmen, top executives, celebrities, athletes, and the reason that we were so successful in accomplishing that was that I think that I protected those people when they came in. We were the very first restaurant in South Florida to be an all-USDA prime steakhouse. The most expensive item that we had on the menu was the baked stuffed lobster. In most restaurants, the most expensive item is not your number one seller, but baked stuffed lobster was the number one seller outside of the steaks. And the number one seller, the steak, varies from place to place in the country. For where we were, the New York Strip was always the steak that was the number one seller in the restaurant. And we always say that's how you test a steakhouse, because there's no way to hide an inferior piece of meat. It just is out there naked for you, and for the tenderness and taste that you get from prime. We served more 3-pound and up live Maine lobsters than anybody in the southeast United States did. We had shipments that would come in 6 days a week. And many times we'd have a truck go into the airport to pick it right up on the tarmac and deliver it back because we had orders on the board that we didn't have any lobsters in-house. I remember the moment well when 9/11 happened. I quickly realized that the jeopardy that my business was in because of needing full access to Port Everglades. Port Everglades was deemed to be one of the 5 highest risk terrorist spots on the East Coast of the United States. The port went into a total lockdown with SWAT teams and all kinds of security. It was very difficult to continue to operate our business. We did not understand how long this was going to happen. This wasn't just a temporary situation. It became, and to this day, Port Everglades is locked down. But if 9/11 had not happened, we'd still be operating. So I remember well calling Burt and telling him the decision that we had to make with the attorneys, that we needed to close the restaurant and pursue the legal ending of our relationship. And it was sad for us to do that. I don't think Burt ever suspected when he started the relationship of building Burton Jack's how important it would become to us. I think it served him well in a different way. At my 50th birthday, Burt was a surprise attendee, and they hid him from me, and he came out just as the festivities were starting. And he took the microphone and he said, "Jack Jackson is the only business partner I ever had where I made money." I think that if Burt were alive today and sitting next to me right now, and you were to ask him what he thought of Jack Jackson, I think he would tell you that Jack Jackson was a good guy. He was the real deal, and he always made me proud of what we created here. I did a fantasy baseball camp with Mickey Mantle and Whitey Ford, and Mickey was 57 years old at the time and had been my hero. But Mickey's legs were bad, and so he ended up being our manager of the day, coach. So about the fourth inning, Mickey gets up to bat. We asked Mickey to DH for us. And I'm in the on-deck circle, and I've got my camera around my neck. And Mickey gets up to bat against Whitey on the mound. So I'm just thinking in my mind, Mickey, just get a little bit of wood on the ball. I don't even care if it's an out. Next pitch, Mickey turns those massive Mantle shoulders, and he hits a ball like only Mickey can do, and he drives it out of the park. The next time he was in for dinner, I sit down next to Mickey, and I've got the tape. And I said, "Mick," I slide it over to him. I said, "Mick, this is you hitting the home run at fantasy camp." And he looks to his left, and he looks to his right, and he says, "I really hit the shit out of it, didn't I?" He was a legend at that time, but he still was going to hit some more home runs. And I'm incredibly proud to be asked to be a member of the Steakhouse Hall of Fame Legends. For me, it's the Academy Award, but I've got a few more home runs I want to hit in my lifetime.